In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to apply ranges for your KPIs across a hierarchy of a single dimension. Now that's a mouthful and it's kind of hard to digest. I'm going to try to show you an example to make that a little more clear. But it will take a lot of focus. This is a little complex, and but it's a nice design strategy that you might be able to utilize in some scenarios when you create KPIs. I have, and I am very happy with this technique. Okay, so let's say we're looking at discount percentage values. Okay, so here's my discount percentage values coming from the cube. I'm not restricting this or filtering this by any time constraints. So this is for the entire cube at Adventureworks. And so for Germany, for example, they're discounting their reseller sales amounts by 1.53% overall. Okay. And Australia is 1.79%, and France, etc., right? In here, I have utilized a data-centric approach to applying the low and high values I'm using. So basically, I'm able to give this 3 different discount status values. A red is anything that falls at the high level. Now that's not normal. Usually your goals are set the other way. At the high level, they're greens. Everyone wants a great amount. But in discounts, you don't want to give away the farm. So we're trying to manage the discounting occurring across the enterprise by country, by state, province, and by city. So if it's anything above 1% for the entire country, we want to red flag it. So we consider that really maybe not a good thing. That's something we want to look at. So that gets a red indicator. Okay? So what happens, I put these 2 values into the database on the Germany country level, and the system uses that. It compares the actual discount value, and depending on whether it's over, if it's over the high amount, then it's going to be a red. If it's between the 0.5 and the 1, the low and the high amount, if it's between them, it's going to be a yellow indicator. And if it's below the low, that means we're not having to give any discounts to get sales, and that's a green indicator. We don't have any green indicators on here right now. But notice I made my default that they're all 5 and 1s here. Okay? Now, I'll show you later how I can go in and change those specifically for Australia or for Canada or for anything. Okay? But now let's go to the next point here. I've also set up default lows and highs for the next level. Okay? So I go into France, and if we look at France, we see that I set up a default data level for low at 0.4% and extended the high level to 1.3%. Okay, so I'm giving a little more leeway to my managers that run the states or state provinces. Okay, so they can give a little bit more discount without getting red flagged. Okay, well in this case Nord France, they went 2.37%, and that's over 1.3, so they're getting red flagged. Okay, so as you see, I'm setting up different high-low ranges according to the level I'm drilling down on. Okay, so there it is. So you see now all of a sudden we're getting some greens down here. So I can't pronounce these well. Val de Morne. They have a 0. They give out no discounts, and so they're below the 4%, and therefore they're green. Okay, and the same thing goes down here. Now you can always pause the screen and kind of study this. If you see no indicators here, that means that there were no sales made there. Okay, so they have no sales amount, and therefore it's not a real they couldn't discount, so they don't get anything there. All right, now there's one more level here. We can go down to the city level. So let's go into Nord and click on Nord, and now we're at a city level. Okay, now there's some of these cities aren't doing any activity. Let's go to a different one. Let's go to, I don't know, is Paris on here? Guess not. Oh, there it is, Seine. Okay, so I click there. There's only one. Okay, let's go to something that has something else. Let's go to the United States, and let's go into California. And notice I also defaulted all the states in United States and all across to 0.4 and 0.13. This was my starting position. Okay, and now if I go into the cities, okay, look here, we have the Redlands, right? And Redlands, as you see, the cities, I redefaulted a different set of low and high values, and I put those at 2% and 1.6. Again, a little even more lenient. Okay, but even with that leniency, this in La Mesa, they're giving out 3% discounts, and that's over the 1.6%, so it's red flagged, right? And some of these, they're not even doing any sales right now. And as we go down, I'm going to find there's some yellows here. And here's Newark. I guess there's a Newark, California. So I think we're in California still. Yeah, we're still in California. So I guess there's a Newark, California. And here they're giving out, boy, they're giving out very little. They're giving out a 0.3% discount, and that's way under 0.2%. So they're green. Okay, so they're not giving many discounts down in here. So as you see, these key performance indicators work pretty well this way, and we are able to granularly differentiate the levels, the city level from the state level from the country level, and apply different high and low values. Now let's do something even better. Let's take one of these red guys. Let's say we're going to Germany and we're looking at Hamburg, and it's at 0.4 and 1.3, right? And they're at 2.49. But you know what? At Hamburg, they like to negotiate, and we're okay with that. 2.49 is definitely acceptable. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to change this range for Hamburg. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the data, and we're going to change that. We're going to reprocess the cube, and after we reprocess the cube, we're going to see this is going to fall within the proper range, because we're going to change the 0.4 to higher. We're going to make it a 1 and a 3. Okay, so when we make that a 1 and a 3, this is going to change to yellow. And this is what's great about this technique I'm using, is that you're able to go by a data-centric approach and change those goals, reprocess, and they're working for you. And yet you don't have to be. It's not a one-size-fit-all. You can really customize exactly your KPI conditions for any member of those levels as well as the whole level. So let's go into Hamburg, Germany, and I'm going to change those things. Okay, so let's go. Let me jump over here, and I'm going to have to do a little bit of quick coding here. Now we're going to get all the cities in Hamburg, but that's okay. We're going to be good with that. So what I'm going to do is, if you look to the side here, this is where we put in all our values. I put in all the country low values, all the state high values. I'm sorry, the country high values, the country low values, state high values, state low values, city high values, and that's where I change it. So what I need to do is I need to change all these state high and state low values to the new numbers I want, because I have 16 rows here. I know there's 655 rows in that dim region, but here I have 16 rows I want to change. So I'm just going to do a quick little update here. Hopefully quick updates can be dangerous, but I'm going to do a quick update, and I'm going to just set, okay, which I know the state low and the state high values, because Hamburg is what we would call a state or a state province, okay, and I'm going to change the state low value, high value. I think we said to 3 because we wanted to not make that a bad guy. That 2.79, right? Let's just look at what we had over there. The 2.79 Hamburg had 2.49, and it was outside the 1.3 range. We want to make that inclusive. So we're going to make that 3, the high level 3, guys. So we're just going to do it for Hamburg at this level. So that's all it's going to affect. Okay, so I go 0.3 on the high level, and we're going to give it, we're going to raise the low level to 0.01. Okay, so 1% and 3. So when I change that, so change, oops, can't just change it like that. I got to have the where clause. That was a close one. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to change this. I'm going to update 16 rows. I'm going to go, and through the magic of video, we're going to process, but you're not going to have to wait for that at all. So what was really cool there was I didn't even have to reprocess the whole cube to get that data back in there. All I had to do was process the dimension, the geography dimension, which I'm going to bring you into in a little while. I just had to process that as an update data. Okay, so as long as I didn't do full, I didn't have to do the whole cube. Just did update data, and now it should reflect it when I hit refresh here. So keep your eye on that red there. It should turn to yellow because this should turn to 3, and this should turn to 3 because that's a high level. That should turn to 1%. Okay, so that should turn yellow, that should turn to 3, and that should turn to 1%. So let's see what happens. So I refresh, and here it is. It's down here now. Hamburg, there's the 1, there's the 3 that we just put in. There's a 2.49, and now instead of it being red, it's yellow. And so the sort moved it down to this area instead of at the top. Okay, and so that's what's nice about this technique is that it's data centric. It's right in with your hierarchy, and then you're able to manipulate those numbers so they're really in tune with what your management style is for those different locations and your strategy. Okay, so I also want to point out that I could do that. I could do that for any one of these members. I mean, at any level. So I could do it for Hamburg, which I just did. I could do it for Bayern, or whatever the name is. Okay, and the cities, I could do it for a specific city. Okay, or all cities, and change all their values. I just have to make sure when I do my updates to that table that everything is correct before I update the dimension. Okay. So, I mean, you generally won't do this very often, maybe once a year or maybe whatever, or maybe tweak it a little bit, but depending on your, you might leave the same settings for years and years and years. It depends. It's not time-centric, this approach. In some, if you're going to go with time-centric, then you might have to modify this approach or go with a new approach. But I'm just showing you one approach that worked really well for us at a company I was at. So, basically, there we are. So I could change it at the country level too. I could come up here. In fact, I'm going to do that real quick. I'm going to change the yellow here in the United States, and I'm going to say, well, maybe United States hardly give any discounts. Okay, so I'm going to bring that 0.5 up to 0.9. Okay, so 0.9 and leave the 1. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go United States, come back over here. I'm going to change that to United States, which is the country level. I'm not going to do any state level. United States, and I want to change it. Okay, rather I'm going to go ahead and make this a 0.8% because I didn't want to. I kind of cut off some of the extra decimals to make it present better. So we're just going to make that 8%. 0.8%. Okay, things are looking really well here. Let's just do a couple little things here just to kind of demonstrate a little extra functionality what's happening here. We'll go to date, and I'm just going to, okay, I'm going to add that as a slicer. All right, so what we can do with the slicer, of course, is we can go ahead and say, okay, 2006, and look at our beautiful little guys changing colors. Kind of cool. Put them all together, that's how we started. All right, if we went down to United States, did the same thing. As you see, our numbers hold steady. Add whatever you want, and they just keep on flipping. So that's kind of cool. So you can, zoom around and see all your key performance indicators and how they behave over time that way. Okay, and of course you can do any other thing you want to slice by, and these indicators will stay, keep on working. Okay, so especially since they're by a percentile, it's not like because you're filtering down on another dimension that they're going to suddenly, because there's not many sales, that they're suddenly not going to have any data, because it's a percentage of sales, so it's always going to have some data. All right, let's move on, and I'm going to go ahead and describe how I did this in the cube so you can do the same thing. Okay, now we're going to come to the technical part of where we actually set this up in the cube and in the relational database. We are using Adventureworks DW 2012, and I have made modifications to it in order to demonstrate and to create this technique. What you saw previously is already created. So what I'm going to do is go through the steps and show you what code I used. And I would probably, if I were you, if you really want to learn this, you need to probably pause the tape at times and move it back and replay it to get the whole gist of this whole thing. There is several steps here as I've listed before you here. And let me go through them real quick. First of all, I add columns to the dim geography table for high and low values by country, state, province, and city levels. Okay. Remember, this is data run, so we're able to granularly go all the way down the city level and then also pop up through the different levels and give it whatever from and to low and high values we want for any one of these elements. In the dim geography table, there's about 655 rows, and you can have each one different if you'd like. And as you update the dimension, it will change how each of the KPIs, each of the symbols of the status of the KPI will work based on what those ranges are. Okay, the second thing is we populate the new columns, obviously, with default values. Like I showed you, I basically just did all the countries the same, then I did all the states the same, then I did all the cities the same, with a general low and high value. Then what I would do is then go into them specifically, or I'd give a user a spreadsheet who is in charge of determining these kind of values, the subject matter expert, and they would then put in all the values, and then I might have an ETL method to bring that in, or I might just bring it in manually. It depends on how big of the dimension is and other aspects and reasons and stuff. So anyways, basically we'll go through that a little bit. Then I'm going to add the dimension. Okay, now that the dimension is updated, okay, I should change this to, I'm going to update the dimension. Basically, I better change this whole thing. Update the cube view with the new columns of the dim geography dimension. Okay, so basically that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to update the cube view so the cube knows all about these new columns because we're going to use them in the cube. Okay, then I need to go into the dimension itself, which is a geography dimension, and add these new low high values for country, state, and city and add them as attributes of the dimension. But I'm going to set all their visible properties to false because no one really needs to look at those. Okay. Third, I'm going to go into the dimension builder there again, and I'm going to go to the attribute relations tab of the dimension builder. And there I'm going to set the relationships between the city, the state province, and the country attributes so that they are bounded to the new elements, the new columns and attributes I just discussed, the country low value, the country high value, etc., etc. And you'll see how that's done. And that's a very necessary step because that will turn these attributes into things we can call properties, and we're going to use a properties function or method to use those later on in the cube. Okay, so that's a very important step, as all these steps are. Then I'm going to set up a calculated member for the low value based on the geography level, based on the current member property, and the property the attribute I'm going to get from that dimension table from a property function. And the same thing with 7, but I'm using the high value, also creating a calculated member. Then that calculated member is then used in a new KPI where I use the calculated member and to help determine the status value, and then of course the symbol indicator. And once I finish that step, then everything is ready to go. And then I can call it from an Excel pivot table, just like I showed you at the beginning of this lesson. So all of these things really have to be done in order. Okay, you can't skip a step here and expect this to work. They all build upon each other. Okay, so right now we're going to go ahead and work on adding a column to the dim geography table for high and low values by country, state, province, and city levels. So I'm going to go to my SQL Server, Management Studio, and we're going to go into the Adventureworks DW 2012. I'm going to go down to the dim geography table, and I've already added these. All this stuff has already been done, so I'm going to show you where I added them. So at the bottom here, I added country high value, country low value, state high value, state low value, and city high value and city low value with all decimal 5,4s. Okay, so I added the columns because I need those columns. Is what's going to make this whole thing cook. Okay, then I went in and I populated all of the entire dim geography table, which, just to show you, I think it's 655 rows. Yes, there is. Okay, and so what I did is I wanted all my country values to be between the low value, which was going to be 0.5%, 1%, and then the high value as 1%. And I did that by doing this update statement, which updates all the records for country, and then all the records for state, high value, with a different low and high value, and then same thing with city, low and high value. I did the same thing here. Okay, so this gets basically, you can just call these defaults, right? So take a look at these numbers here, and let's just go in and take a look at the table, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So select asterisk from. Okay, so now we have a result set here, so I can kind of show you how this works. So as you see, here's the city Alexandria, and all the Australia come in first. And as you see, all the country high values, low value to high value, and then the state province or state high value, low value is all New South Wales, and these I kept the same for all of them. And then the cities the same; they have their own setup there. But you can come in here and change these to whatever you want. Okay. So if you're going to change, what you don't want to do is if you change Alexandria, the city, you only should change these two values. Because if you go and change the country, in this Australia, is changed and another Australia has a different value, you might run into errors when you process your dimension. Okay. Now you could go into Australia and change, and if you change Australia, you got to change all of Australia's here, because the height it encompasses everything underneath it, and it plays that way. So you can't have these different levels. If you have a city down here, you can't change what the grand total is for Australia up here and make it different from another Australia country level. Okay. So, and the same thing goes with state. You have to, everything has to play by the rules here, okay? But you can go down here and under New South Wales, as long as you change all the New South Wales to the same low number and high number, you're okay. But don't go and change this one to one low number and this one to another low state low number. Then you're going to have a problem when you compile, okay, or when you process the data. So it's pretty simple on how you do it. Just follow the rules, makes sense, okay? So, but you can come in here and fine tune these things, okay? But when you go to the city level, since there's only one city, you can make this whatever you want. But when you go to a level where there's multiple rows for that level, you have to make sure that all these values stay the same. For Hessen, for example, has to stay the same all the way up. Okay, you can't have one differences. And country the same way. And of course, country is going to be a lot more than state province in counts, and state province is going to be a lot more than the counts of city by itself. Okay, so that's how you update these things. So I've already got all these numbers in here, and as we remember, we did the Hamburg here. So when we did Hamburg, if you remember, I changed it from on the statewide from a 1 and a 3, 1% and a 3% on the high. Okay, and that's okay because I did, if you look at this for Hamburg, all of them are set that way. As you look over here, 1 and 3, and that's the way you have to do it. Okay, and of course the countries are still the same, even though Hessen is 0.4 and 1.3. Okay, that's okay. As long as all the Hamburgs and you're in the state level are the same, you're okay. All right? You just can't go and change this Hamburg in München with the one in Paderborn. Okay? You can't change the state values in these two. They got to be the same. Okay? But you can change all of them at once, yes, for Hamburg at the state level. Okay? I hope you think that through, but this is very important because if you get these out of whack, you're going to have some errors in your when you're processing that dimension later. Okay. All right. So that describes how I populated the new columns and how I added those new columns. So let's just tag those off. Now the next thing, we're going to update the cube view with the new columns from the dim geography dimension. Okay, now in most cubes that I build, I always have my view in my cube view set up against right. So here's a data source. I'm in the cube here in Visual Studio, and I go to my view, which I'm double clicking on Adventureworks DW. Okay, and as you see, my cube is here. My view is here for the cube. Of course, this is the first step when you build a cube. But once you add, okay, since each one of these entities here, when you look at their properties, you'll see that they're just tables. They're not even views. Okay, so if it was a view and you changed added columns in a table. Well, as long as the view didn't change, this view builder here would never pick it up. But since we're going right against tables and I added rows to the tables, when you hit this refresh button, it will identify if there were changes to the tables that are involved in this view. Okay? And if there are, it will tell you, okay, you added this column, it's deleted this column, it changed this column, and then you'll confirm it. Then the view then is refreshed and it's up to date. Okay, So I've already done that step, so I can't really do that. I can click it, but it's just going to say everything's cool, like no changes have been found. But when I originally changed and added those 6 columns, it found them and presented it to me and said, "Is this okay with you?" And I said, "Fine." Well, yeah, I clicked OK. All right. So anyways, so if we look at and we go over there and I go to Reseller Sales, is an easy way to look at it. These are just little views of the big cube. If you looked at the whole cube at once, I mean, so this is why you have different diagrams here otherwise it's just crazy. So like if you look at all the tables at once like this, they're everywhere, right? But if you can take those and just kind of segment those off into simpler diagrams so you can see it. So if I go to Reseller Sales and I expand that and I look for the dim geography, let's see, it's got to be around here somewhere. There it is, right here. So if I look down on this, you're going to see, there it is, country high, country low, state high, state low, and city high, city low. So it picked up my values. I need it in this view in order for me to go to the next step. If it's not in this view, I can't go to the next step. So let's look at the next step. So I updated the cube view. That's done. And now I'm going to add them, which is the columns, the new columns. I'm going to add them to the dimension and set their visibility property to false. So I'm going to go over there. So I go back into my Visual Studio and I go to Solution Explorer. I'm going to double click on geography and we'll find a dimension, but I know geography is already open, so I'm going to pop over there. And as you see on the right, there's my table, and there's my country high, country low, just waiting for me. And I have already brought those over and added them as attributes to the geography dimension. But really, I'm not really presenting them to the users. I guess I could, but I'm not right now. So what I would generally do here is go to city high, city low, country high, country low, state province, state province high, state province low, and then hit that 4 key, go to the properties and set their visibility over to false. Okay, so you don't have to, for no one sees them. Okay, and so I set them all to false. So that was that step. So I brought them in as attributes, so they're attributes. I set them to false. So now they're not going to be visible, but I want to use them still. So now I go to the next step. I got to set them up as properties in the Attribute Relationships tab of the Dimension Viewer. Okay. So I know down the road I want to use these guys as properties. So in order to use them as properties, I got to set up a relationship with them to this hierarchy I'm binding them with. Okay. So I'm going to do this step here. I'm going to go to this Attribute Relationships tab of the Dimension Builder and set them up there. So let's go over there and see how I did that. So here's my Dimension Builder. I guess I call it Builder. And here's my tab, Attribute Relationships. And in this tab, I have a hierarchy of city, state, province, and country. Now, when I first came in here, before I did this step, these guys weren't underneath them. Okay, they were related directly to the key. Okay. So when you relate it, what I did was I set up new attribute relationships. If you look down here, here's attribute relationships. So you see, some of these are set directly to the key. At least they should be. City's got to be. Our postal code is. So postal code goes directly to the key, right? And then city is made up of postal codes, and state is made up of cities, and so that's how the relationships go. But what I wanted to do was that I need to say, well, whenever you're on the city level, then these properties called city high value and city low value need to bind to that city. Okay, and when you're on the state, these guys are going to bind to it. State, province, high value, and low value, and country, the same thing. Okay, so what I did was I came over to the area here, to city. I right-clicked and said New Attribute Relationship, and I set up this relationship, city high value, which you see there. And I can set up other ones, but these are the ones I needed for what I'm trying to do, right? So I set those up. All right. And same here. Okay. So these are all set up, and so that was what I had to do in order for these to become allowed to be called with the properties function later on, which is the next step. Okay, so then I'm done with the dimension. I process that dimension. Now, just a piece of warning is that if you get, like I told you about before in that data, if you start putting in areas that shouldn't have, the high and low in the country, the same country, are different, that's going to mess up the logic, and it could very well stop your dimension from processing. And if it stops from processing, you get some problems, because then the whole cube won't process. Okay, so make sure that's, if you have problems to building your dimension and you've been changing data in that table, that's probably the first place you want to look. Okay, and if you can't figure that out, you might have to do restore a backup of that table, or the data in that table, to something that was working before, until you figure it out. So I'm just giving you a hunch there. It's a very powerful area, but you can screw it all up too. So try not to, and keep your backups available. Okay, until you really know, sure of that, this kind of thing. Okay, so anyways, so that's what you have to do in the dimension. And if we come back to my list, now we have to set up our calculated members. We're going to set up two calculated members, one for low and one for high. Okay, so let me just mark those off. And that's what we're going to do over here. So I go back to the cube. At this point, I would have created the dimension and built it, make sure everything built fine, obviously. So for every one of these steps, I want to make sure things are working right before I go to the next step. So if something goes wrong, I can pretty much identify that it happened in what I just did or something, right? So okay, so Adventureworks cube, I go into the cube itself, okay, which if it wasn't open, right, let me close up some of these guys. Right, so here I am over in my Solution Explorer. I just want to open up the cube because I need to go to the calculations. I want to create two calculated members. So I go to calculations and I come down to these two calculations. So this is where the rubber hits the road, I guess. When I look at these two calculations, they're both very similar. One's for high, one's for low. So this is some MDX. Some of you will see it and say, oh, that's not so bad. And some will see it and say, oh my God, it's horrible. So let's take a look at it. And but you know what? There's no time like the present to start learning MDX. A little bit anyways. It's not too bad. Let me explain how this works. So, how this works is this an if statement, right? Or a couple if statements, nested if statements. So this probably should be indented. Or it could be a case statement almost. So what this is saying is that when I'm sitting over in my Excel spreadsheet, and I'm sitting on a row over there, okay? I'm sitting on this row, Canada, right? And then when I go to the next row, there's this, and now I'm sitting on British Columbia. What are these? What's the difference between these two? Well, one thing, what level am I on this row? This is what they call the current member in MDX. If I'm sitting on this one, this is the current member, and everything concentrates on the current member. So if I say, hey, is the current member the country level, or the state province level, or the city level? Because level is a term in MDX that means something. It understands what levels are. Levels are really your attribute names. So if your attribute name is country, that's a level. Okay? It also can be used in a hierarchy also. But in our case, we can just say attribute, if the level equals country, then we know where that, if the current member's level equals country, then we're going to do something. If the current member's level equals state province, we're going to do something else. If the current member's level equals city, then we're going to do something else. Well, what's that something else we're going to do? Well, that something else we're going to do is we're going to grab the discount low and discount high values from the corresponding attribute. So if my current member level equals city, I'm going to grab from the attribute called city low discount percentage and city low high discount percentage. And if I'm sitting on Canada, and since my current member is level equals country, I'm going to grab from country low high. So let's take a look at what we're talking about here. So here I am. I say if I have the geography 2 current member level name equal to country, then I want to return the value of that current member, which we know is Canada, and its property called country high value. So it's going to return whatever value was assigned to it for Canada on the country high value. If I recognize that it's the level here, name, is state province, then I'm going to return the current member property, which is those values I stuck in, state province high value. Okay? And if it's city, now it can't be all three of these. It has to be one or the other. It has to be either country. The level's either country, it's either state, or it's city. So it isn't like you're going to run into a problem. So if it's city, then you're going to bring in this. And if nothing is there, let's say you don't even have the geography region in there, it's going to read this and it's going to say, bring back empty set, null. All right. So I do this over, this is a calculated member, that's the logic it uses. And so that's the logic it uses for the high value. For the low value, guess what? Pretty much the same darn thing, except for I've intertwined the word low in there, right? So here's low value, low value, low value. But state, the logic's the same. So it's really not, in some ways it's very scary looking because you're not used to that language if you don't do the MDX. But the logic really is pretty basic. You just got to understand this concept of current member, which we really don't have in a lot of our SQL. We don't think that way. Okay, so that gets us, so now we got two calculated members that return those values. And what are these two? Well, guess what they are? When we look at our Excel that we were looking at before, disk percentage low, disk percentage high, there they are right there. I bring back these. I don't even have to bring back these, but I bring them back because I want you to see them. I could set the visibility to false, but right now I'll leave them at true. But as you see, they're coming back in here. And what do I do with these guys? I use these guys against the actual discounted value, aggregate, to figure out what my discount status is going to be in my symbol. I created those. Now my last step here is to set up the KPI. That's this guy. That's this guy. That's what the KPI is. So, but I use everything I've done all the way up here. It's all building process. So when I come in here, when I come in here, I go to KPIs now. Now, there's already a bunch of KPIs for Adventureworks, and I've set mine up a little differently because theirs look a little neater in some ways. But because I'm using this between and making it really custom so that you can granularly do whatever you want, I decided to put some of that logic up in the calculated members So when I got down into this area, it's a little more simplified. Otherwise, it would get really kind of complicated, a lot more complicated. So I abstracted that out. So let's look at this. So here's my disk KPI. Okay. Again, let's compare it to what we got over in our spreadsheet. What's this? Disk status, right? We go over here to KPIs. What do we got? We got, there it is, disk, right? What are we getting? We got to put the goal in here. We put the value in here, and then we put the status in here. Well, this is the status. The disk value here, I already put that in from the calculated member, so I didn't need to really even do that. So, lose my voice, but let's just look at this. So here's my value, which is the actual value, which is, again, this guy here. So I'm using that value. Goal expression, I'm not using goal expression here. I just put a 1 in there. It's not going to be used anywhere. And here it is. Here's the logic, the whole final logic. First of all, I say when the KPI value, which is, this is a KPI, I'm in the KPI. This function says when the KPI value called disk or discount, hey, what's this name? Discount. So it's saying when this value, and what's this thing? KPI value expression. Okay, so that's this guy. If that equals 0 and the reseller sales amount equals 0, which I know if both of them equal 0, you're not going to get a discount. Then I return a null. A null is a blank. That's when you see all those names there that don't have any indicators, any status indicators. They're there because they don't have any sales. And this, if I didn't put this when clause in there, they would show up with maybe a green indicator, which I didn't want anything to show up. So I have that first. Then I say when the value is greater than the disk high, right, which is my calculation from over here, this percentage high, right? When that, so it doesn't have to know what level it's at. It already determined that there. So it's saying when the actual value is greater than the disk high that I determined from the current member, we're going to bring it back a -1. -1, when you do the shapes are red, yellow, green. -1 is red. 0 is yellow. And 1 is green. Okay, so just remember that. So I'm bringing back it. So if it's greater than the high value of that data I brought in as a limit, it's going to bring back a red. If it's, then the next one is a between statement, more or less. It says if this is greater than the low value and less than the high value, or basically is it between the low and the high value, then bring back a 0, which is yellow. Okay? And if it's below, if the discount value is greater than 0, because I don't want it negative, because that shouldn't be negative ever. If it's greater than 0 or equal 0, and less than the disk low, which is the lowest level of discounts, then bring back a 1. And what's 1? 1 is green. Okay, then I do an else null. All right? So that's how we figure out whether it's a red, yellow, or green. So that's the code. Not too complicated, but there's a lot of steps, and because there's a lot of steps, you could call it complicated. Because there's MDX, and if you're not used to MDX, you could call it complicated. But it's extremely powerful. You can use this technique for to build granularity where you might not otherwise have it. A lot of times, when I first started building these kind of KPIs and this sort of thing, you built it, but then when it bubbled up, it would just add everything together, and the bubble, a lot of times you didn't want to do it that way. At the higher levels, they did it a different way. It was independent of the lower levels. It wasn't a bubble up situation. And you didn't want to have to do allocation downward either. So this method really gave my user, my the subject matter expert who was trying to put this together, right, from a business standpoint, the kind of control he or she needed in order to get the KPIs to be effective. Because there's a lot of KPIs out there. They're beautiful. They're colorful. But you know what? If they're not effective, what's the point? They're a mess. They're a waste of time. Okay, so sometimes you have to go the extra mile to get that customization element so that they can be customized exactly the way you want them. Because, hey, you know what? In this kind of technique that I'm showing you, gives your users in business the flexibility to customize the way they do things down to a granular level in their business. Okay, I made a quick change, which I'm editing into this, and into the calculated member that I just showed you. And as you recall, there were those times when we were clicking on different areas and there were blanks showing up. Okay, and I wanted to go through that a little bit. Basically, it was looking more kind of like this, and then you would see some of the cities or some of the state provinces would show a low and a high value, but then no discount value, and then we wouldn't show the indicator. And I found that, with a little bit of extra MDX, I was able to change this so that we could get rid of those. So basically, let me just show it to you real quick. So if we go back to those two statements for the calculated members, here's a high one, and I put it into the notes where we were before. Okay, so I'm just going to push this in right below it. And what you're going to see here is what I added was that if it's a country and the measure's reseller sales amount is not null, what this does is that there's no reason to show anything on that row if the reseller sales amount doesn't have a value in it. Okay, so if it's null, we don't want to show a value. By putting this extra condition in for each one of these if statements, I'm able to eliminate all those phantom rows that showed up just before, as you could see before. So it's a much cleaner look. I did the same thing down in the low values. So if I go to low values and I do the same thing, I add that condition, okay, and when you go back to Excel, you see how nice and clean and compressed everything is. There's no phantom blanks in here and that kind of thing. Everything is just what it's supposed to be. Okay, so I just wanted to add it back in here as kind of a after the fact edit. I'm sorry about that, but I thought it was that important that and it just makes for that much better of a presentation when you come in here. As you see, there's no phantoms here. Everything is really clean and tight. Okay, there's no blank rows or semi-blank rows. I hope this helps you. I know it helped my customer when I did this, and it's not a real simple technique. There's a lot of moving parts here, but if you take your time and you study this and work with it, I think it can save you a tremendous amount of time going forward if the scenario is right for this. Thank you. This concludes this video. Please come and see more of my videos at www.sequelcoop.com. Thank you.